it's difficult for us as well if they don't pull to the right and stop. If you can't get to the left-hand lane and change, you don't know whether you should pass them on the right, because if you come up on the right-hand side, that's when they decide they're going to pull over.
Never pass them on the right.
Oh, I know.
You're toast if you pass them on the right.
It's so dangerous.
Motoring 92 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil.
City traffic, it's not getting any easier to get around. But what about if you're an emergency vehicle? How do you cope with the frustrations of driving in the city like this ambulance? And who are the men and women behind the wheel? Well, this week we're going to try and find out, and we're going to begin our story by joining Steve Grant.
Now, when you hear a siren like that, whether it's coming from an ambulance, a fire truck, or a police cruiser, it usually only means one thing: somebody's in trouble somewhere. And for the men and women who drive these vehicles, the idea is to get to an emergency as quickly as possible, but in a very controlled manner. This is not a job for hell drivers.
Units 209 and 210, the information comes back on that vehicle. The vehicle was just reported stolen. It's just been involved in a shooting at Wilson Heights Boulevard and Shepherd, apartment 2050. It's believed the occupant went into their premises, shot somebody with a shotgun, left the premises after his drug deal went sour at 10-4.
What you're watching is a mock police pursuit. The unmarked Chevy is driven by the suspect. Real or not, it's a stressful situation for the police. Not only do they have to keep up with the bad guy through a series of obstacles, they also have to keep up the lines of communication through two-way radio.
We get officers that have been on the job from anywhere from 3 to 30 years, and the response we get is phenomenal. As you say, the officers are in the cars a lot, and they're always willing to learn and be educated, and they come up here, and some of them realize that the skills that they've developed, or the bad habits that they've developed, are affecting their skills, and they come up here and they reintroduce themselves to some of the skills that they forgot, and they realize how they can improve their ability.
Suspect stay in the vehicle.
A lot of it is experience, some of it is education, but yes, I-lead, what we term I-lead, is so important so that you can identify and predict what we call the critical path, and you can predict any potential hazards so that when you're looking up well ahead, you can do that. If you're looking down on the road surface or at the vehicle in front of you, I'm afraid all you can ever do is react to what the person is doing in front of you. And that, I'm afraid, is what most drivers tend to do.
Okay, guys. Now on this side, we're going to be doing what's called high performance driving. You're going to be driving to a call, all right? And then after you complete that portion, okay, you're going to drive the same course again, but with a patient.
Metro Toronto ambulance personnel share the same skid pad with the police, and for this crew, defensive driving is number one on the priority list.
That's correct. Our profession has grown to the point where you used to only worry about the actual patient care training. Now we have to be very, very concerned about what it takes to drive, and be more aware that if, you know, all of the patient care training in the world is not all it takes to save someone's life. You have to have good driver education. We also focus a lot on physical fitness.
Anytime they will take a sharp turn, the machine will go off. If it's too rough, the turns are too fast, okay?
We're out driving when most of the people in the middle of a snowstorm are home safely and the cars are in the garages. Our people are out there, and we recognize they face some pretty horrendous difficulties. They not only the skill of keeping the car on the road, they've got to worry about accessing the patient, how do they park their vehicle, and most important, how are they going to negotiate through the either the snow, the ice or the sleet, or just dense traffic, which is a combination of the same elements, or a summer's day, what you're faced with is, does the other motorist realize the potential for an emergency to take place? Have they kept themselves in a defensive driving mode? Are they driving defensively?
We have our share of accidents like any other emergency service, and a lot of them, funny enough, are not major. You have a lot of very minor accidents where crews in a rush, they arrive on an emergency call, the partner's tied up doing patient care, the person behind the wheel has to back into a tight spot and, bang, they hit a wall or they hit another vehicle. They're the most common types of accidents that we have. By taking the crews through very slow skill testing types of maneuvers where some of them will just say it's monotonous time and time again, but we feel that it's time well spent in practicing backing into tight spots and so on, where they really get used to maneuvering the vehicle with using the mirrors only. They don't have any other assistance. People dial 911 in an emergency, they hang up the phone and they sit there and they wait, and sometimes in an emergency 60 seconds will go by, and some people describe that as minutes. What we like to see people do, especially in the evening hours when it's dark, if they're calling us to their residence for assistance, go outside, turn on the light, make sure that when they see us coming down the road that they motion to us. We know exactly where we're going, and that can help reduce very, very important response time.
BMW referred to the driver's seat as a workplace for the serious driver. Workplace is perhaps a little harsh because the driver is never forced to work hard at doing or reaching anything.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the third generation of the popular 3 Series BMW. This is the 1992 325i, a car that owes as much to its heritage as it does its German engineering. The new 325i features a unique rear suspension similar to the one found on the BMW Z1 sports car. The whole setup is designed to keep toe-in consistent regardless of spring position or travel. In a nutshell, it minimizes the car's reaction to weight transfer, be it acceleration or braking. This ensures predictability. Add this to the car's 50-50 weight distribution and you have a car that is as near neutral as you can get. The pylon test became a cakewalk where every run through became a little quicker than the last. Under the hood is a 24-valve 2.5-litre straight 6 that produces 189 horsepower and 181 pounds-feet of torque. Matched with this silky smooth engine is the best clutch and transmission I have ever tested. The clutch is light and progressive, and the transmission has a tight positive feel that, as I said, is second to none. On the skid pad we required a tick over 8 seconds to reach the 100k mark. While the initial oomph is respectable, it is not until you get beyond 2800 RPM that the engine begins to sing. This results in good mid-range performance and smooth highway cruising. During the brake test, the upgraded 4-wheel disc brakes, complete with an anti-lock feature, put on a stellar performance. We averaged a commendable 116 feet to stop from 80k. On a previous BMW road test, I mentioned the rear passenger seat belts, and I want to reiterate the point on this road test. You'll notice that the seat belt comes over the right shoulder rather than the usual left shoulder. Now, why is this significant? Quite simply, if you're unlucky enough to get broadsided, you won't end up headbutting the guy sitting next to you. Now, I think that represents a significant step forward for rear passenger safety. The new 325 is larger than any of its predecessors, boasting an extra 5 inches between the wheels. This larger wheelbase improves ride comfort, but more importantly results in more legroom for the rear passengers. Now, this was a major complaint in other 3 Series Bimmers. The trunk is limited in size, but is easily loaded and unloaded. The lack of a ski pass-through or folding rear seat seems to emphasize the latter point. A neat feature is the toolkit housed in the underside of the deck lid. BMW referred to the driver's seat as a workplace for the serious driver. Workplace is perhaps a little harsh because the driver is never forced to work hard at doing or reaching anything. Typically, everything inside this car is understated. The dash is analog and easy to read, and apart from an alphanumeric display, it is clean and uncluttered. This busy display incorporates a check-cum-control system with a trip computer. Information provided here can be picked up from the dash or a display screen mounted in the center console. Elsewhere, the all-round visibility is good thanks to a tall greenhouse and thin roof pillars. The windows include a retain power feature. This allows you to close the windows with the ignition key removed. As well as the now mandatory airbag in this class of car, they have included knee bolsters and all hard surfaces have been thoughtfully padded. My pet peeve on the 325i has to do with the indicator lights in these three buttons. During the daytime they're just too dim and too small to see. Now while I was driving the car it was obvious when the air conditioner was turned on or off, but I never really did fully know if we were in recirculating air or the rear defroster was on. Anyway, now to the scoreboard for a rundown on the 1992 BMW 325i. This new Bimmer excelled in the pylon test. The 50-50 weight distribution, a competent suspension and sticky rubber combine in a very pleasing manner. So pleasing in fact that the 325 was a full 10 kilometers an hour faster through the course than one of its major competitors. We ran to the 100k mark in just over 8 seconds. As with many vehicles in this category, initial oomph is less than spectacular, but once the motor comes on cam, performance improves dramatically. The four-wheel disc brake system, complete with an anti-lock feature, turned in flawless stops each and every time. On the skid pad, we averaged stopping distances of 116 feet from 80k. The ride is on the firm side, as are the seats. Having said that, neither are uncomfortable. There is little or no wind and road noise, and engine noise has been kept to a minimum. The 325 is a little on the thirsty side. The best we averaged was 11.5 litres per 100 kilometres, or just over 24 miles per gallon. The new 325i is quick, agile, responsive, and above all fun to drive. An M5 it isn't, but it will sure give the competition a darn good run for their money.
Well, we've seen how emergency drivers are trained, but what's it like when they get out there in the real world? Well, to try and find out, we have come to Metro Ambulance Station 40 in downtown Toronto. And what we're going to do is go behind the scenes as the men and women here respond to emergency driving situations.
If we know what people are going to do, then we know what we have to do. I've been caught driving to a call and a guy will turn left, or he'll pull to the left.
Right in front of you.
And like that's the last thing that you expect him to do. You're smoking out to the left to go around him, and then he decides he pulls to the left. If they all would just pull over to the right and stop, that's the key too. Because like you said, or I don't know who said it, if you got to turn right, you're toast. They keep going, and you're trying to pass the guy, and he's right beside you. You open the door, kick the door.
It's difficult for us as well if they don't pull to the right and stop. If you can't get to the left-hand lane and change, you don't know whether you should pass them on the right, because if you come up on the right-hand side, that's when they decide they're going to pull over.
Never pass them on the right.
Oh, I know.
You're toast if you pass them on the right.
It's so dangerous.
There's the crew that we're, now watch, see? See, they don't, if they stopped, they could have got around here a couple of seconds. And pedestrians too, they get in the way. These are the same guys going to the scene, most probably.
question on the driver's test when you're writing it that pertains to emergency vehicles and the answers are, there's 4 answers, and if you pick the wrong one, nobody comes back and corrects you. So people aren't made aware of the proper rules of the road before they get their license to drive, and it's not corrected, and it just perpetuates year after year when they're driving.
I think most of the people that do the wrong thing when you're out there is because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
That's all. It's not because they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do.
And we can't stop in the middle of the call
And
to
tell them.
explain it to the person.
No matter how many times you might want to.
Well, you can't explain it to them as you go by.
As you go by. You point the finger out the window.
Where are we going?
You're going to be area for a chest pain on the street.
Well, with chest pains, he's conscious and breathing okay. ID number is 336-931 at 12:59.
Yeah, people should use common sense. Just see where we're trying to go and then move out of the way so we can get by. Because, for example, on a one-way street, everybody's supposed to pull to either curb and we can go down the middle. But sometimes if everybody's pulled to the right, then one guy is doing what he's actually supposed to do and pull to the left, he could be blocking you off completely. But if he looks back and sees everybody's to the right, he should get over to the right too.
I'm in an intersection. I want to turn left. I hear a siren behind me. What do I do?
Don't move.
One of the easiest things would be if you didn't move. If you try and move, if there's nowhere safe for you to go, if it would be safe for you to change into the right-hand lane and let us come into your lane. But generally, there's lots of other cars around you. And if you're stopped, we'd like you to just stay where you are, because then I can decide how to go around you.
Especially if it's a red light, people tend to pull out into the intersection or through on a red light, which is dangerous for them. If they just stay still, at least we know where we can go.
These guys are doing a good job. They must know they're on camera. This is tough when they're just those guys back there were doing a good job. It's exactly what you're supposed to do. Pull over to the right and stop. Makes life very easy for us.
What if an emergency vehicle is approaching me in the other lane coming towards me? Do I have to do anything, or do I just keep on driving?
Pull to the right. You pull to your right and stop. Because if we're going to use your lane coming at you, you don't want to be in that lane. And stopping in that lane isn't sufficient if we're going to use it.
It becomes really evident if you're driving up the road and you see an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car coming toward you in your lane. It's fairly obvious that you should think about doing something. And obviously the best thing to do is pull to the right. You gotta look out the window sometimes when you do that, because what'll happen is you'll go to turn right. These guys that you just passed figure you're going through, and they'll pull out. So all we'll do. There you go. You gotta get around them. So you've got to be aggressive to a certain extent. I think the key is, first you get good, then you get fast.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
You can't go out there, with a week on the job, or a year, or 5 years, or 10 years on the job, and say, I'm real fast now. It takes years to get good. I mean, after you've done thousands and thousands of these calls, and you pull up and you recognize the sea. For example, the old guy with a hat. We all say, we've all seen it. But when you've seen it 1,000 times, you're pulling up behind an old guy with a hat. He's going to do something goofy. Don't get caught. But that's something you learn with experience. And once you get to know that, that's how you get good. And you know how big the car is. For example, these cars haven't changed more than an inch in years. Yep. And you know exactly how big that car is. After you've been doing it long, you can look down the road and see 2 transport trucks sitting there on Richmond Street if you're trying to get through. And you'll know you'll make it. And you go screaming down, you won't even think about it. You may have that much on either side, but you know it's going to fit because you know how big the car is.
You don't want to spend 5 minutes at an intersection just making sure everyone comes to a stop because you're on an emergency call. You want to get there as quickly as you can. But on the other hand, you don't want to
get there
crack up. You don't want to crack up on the way there. Yeah, you want to be able to get to the call. So
if people just didn't panic, I think we'd be a lot better, because they don't think when they hear us. If they started thinking a bit relaxed, and they pull over and realize that they have the room to do it. But driving down here in the city, that's what it is. Everyone panics when they see us coming up behind them. Or even just paying more attention, occasionally looking in your rearview mirror like you're supposed to. Yeah. No, you would see, if you didn't hear us, for instance, if you had your stereo way too loud, you at least see the lights coming, hopefully, and start to do something then, not wait until we're right behind you and then act.
In a few minutes, these kids are going to be getting on a school bus. We're going to remind you what your obligations as a driver are next on Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
The traffic police have a special spot in their ticket book reserved for people who pass school buses when they're loading and unloading kids. Even our own producer, the lovely and talented Steve, had a conversation with the constable interrupted unexpectedly when the cop decided to pursue somebody who had passed the school bus. The law is pretty clear. When the lights are flashing and the sign is out, you must stop until the lights go off. And the reasons are pretty obvious. Kids getting on and off school buses, they're not paying attention. They're worried about the mark they got on the history quiz, or thinking about what Sally Johnson was wearing in chemistry class, or how about those Blue Jays? Now be reasonable when you see a school bus. They're fairly easy to spot. They're bright yellow, they got the lights going. Get on your brakes early and hard, get your four-way flashers on, and watch your rearview mirror to make sure the people behind you have got the news. Be prepared to give your horn a bit of a honk to warn the kids crossing the street, just in case somebody coming from behind has not been paying attention. And please, don't blame the poor school bus driver for delaying your drive home. She's got a busload of screaming kids to worry about. She doesn't need your problems too. I'm Jim Kenzie. And you kids be quiet on the way home, all right?
Well, that's it for this week. We want to thank the Toronto Metro Ambulance Service for their cooperation. And remember, the next time you hear a siren like that, pull over to the right and stop. You'll make some people very happy. That's it for now, but we'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
Motoring 92 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil.